Midwest Shooting Center. What is the franchise? How does it work? What's the story? Coming up next. All right, Zach, to frame the story, I like starting with what your franchise story is. So how did you fall into franchising as the opening question?
As me as an individual or us as a company?
You as an individual.
Well, me as an individual is pretty boring. I honestly, just because, I came into the business with Midwest Shooting Center before we started franchising. So we've existed for a number of years, just building out our own corporate locations. And actually, we just started franchising this year, starting that process back in January. And for months leading up to that, we were looking for someone outside of our company to come in and be the franchise director in charge of franchising the brand out. And we actually hired that person. We kind of realized internally, as much as we like to promote internally, that we needed somebody that knew franchising to come on board and help us grow the business. Well, we brought that person on. They had immense amount of experience within franchising, but about a week or two went by and we realized they weren't the right fit for us culturally and internally as a business. And we kind of made the decision that it made more sense for someone within the business to learn franchising than it was for someone outside of the business that knows franchising to learn Midwest Shooting Center. So this opportunity came up to me as the one to kind of take on the franchising, and I took it on, full steam ahead. So,
I mean, I'm fascinated by that. So are you a part of the discussions that are saying whether we're going to franchise the business or not?
I was not originally. So I came on board about 2 years ago. When I came on board, we had one corporate location. We were about to open 2, 3, and 4 that year in the fall of 2021. And I came on just as a single location operator with the idea that growth was going to be happening in the business. I believed in the brand. I believed in the guys that were running this company. And I came on board and took a position that probably took a pay cut to come over here, but I knew that, opportunities were had. And when the opportunity for this came on board, I jumped on it. So,
all right. So they go through the process of becoming a franchise, wrong fit on the person, which very fair point. It's a lot easier to teach someone maybe not teach someone franchising than teach a whole business concept. And so now they say, all right, you are occupying that seat. And this is how long ago?
Beginning of this year. So we just finalized our FDDs in January.
So I'm fascinated by this, and I bring this up all the time. You're not going to be the only brand that does this. Actually, you're in a list of many brands that do this. But go back to that moment. You're now going to go figure out what franchising is. Isn't it like it's somewhat overwhelming to start figuring it out, right?
It was, and it still kind of is, but I think the key to it was just slow and steady wins the race. So, while we finalized and registered, all of the states that we wanted to franchise in starting in January of this year, we really didn't start presenting it, in terms of trying to award our first franchise until about June or July. So I spent that first 6 months kind of information overload and learning the franchise side of the coin, and then building out our game plan, building out all of our, procedures, SOPs, all of those things necessary before we ever even thought about kind of presenting it to a franchisee.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because 6 months of learning this, processes, procedures, getting the foundational right. And my point is, when a candidate lands on a franchisor's website, not one franchisor says, wait a second, before you fill out that inquiry, let's start educating you on what franchising is. It's like almost assume that a franchise buyer is going to know more than the franchisor, but the reality is they know far less. And so now you get a candidate, and this is the industry as a whole, you get candidates that fill out the form and don't reply to your calls or your emails because they're not ready to actually do it. They need to figure out what franchising actually means,
Yeah, and it was even stranger for this industry because we are the only company franchising in this industry. So we were the first ones to do it. So the majority of people that we've spoke to that are interested in franchising are not coming to us because they are looking for a franchise necessarily. They're looking to be a, retail range firearm operator, and, just happen to stumble upon us as someone that can give them those tools to that success, not necessarily specifically looking for franchising. So.
What are you guys I'm looking here. What are you guys disclosing as the cost by the business?
Yeah, so we have 7 corporate locations currently, and we're going to continue building those out. And all of those locations are at least 30,000 square feet. We've traditionally taken over big box retailers, Kroger's, Babies R Us, those type of things. We've just retrofitted into our operations. But with franchising, that allows us to do much smaller models. So we are giving franchisees an option of 10,000 to 30,000 square foot models. And that allows us to kind of go into areas we may not go into demographic wise and population wise as a corporate location. So with that range varies greatly based on the size model that they go, but we're telling people 1.8 to 3.5 million all in, that including franchise fees, inventory, development, everything.
Are you doing an item 19?
So myself and the CEO go back and forth on this. Our 2023 FDD does not have an item 19 on it. However, it will be in our 2024. We did not want to put it in there when we first started off, mostly because we would be required to use our corporate entities. And while we're very proud of our success on the corporate side, we didn't want to have franchisees basing, their success or lack thereof based on our corporate. But we've decided that it is a very beneficial sales tool for us to use moving forward. So it'll be on our 2024 FDD.
I mean, for what it's worth, I can look at the beauty of your locations, and if you're now opening up your 7th, there's a secret in there. You're not opening up 70s if you don't make money.
Sure.
But when you're dealing with investments over $1 million, now the buyer is probably going to ask more questions because it's more of a business operation than being a franchisee. So I think you're taking the right approach to that. How much? I'm curious from a brand standpoint, how much does politics or the politics of a state play into how you're going to focus from a development standpoint?
Not as much as a lot of people think, to be honest with you. It is kind of a careful dance in terms of where we decide where to go into, because typically, in order for us to be a 30,000 square foot retail operation, we need to be in highly populated, denser areas. And those tend to be major metros. And with major metros tend to be a diverse population, whether it's politically or, income or whatever. But by and large, we've found that regardless of where we enter, whether it's a traditionally, right-leaning city or left-leaning city, that we're able to be successful in kind of any demographic that we go into. It plays a small part in it, but I don't think it plays nearly as much as people from outside the industry might think it does.
Well, look, there's probably a value in that insight. For what it's worth, if it doesn't overly matter, then that means silent America is really the middle, because the loudest voice isn't impacting the business, no matter what area of the political side you fall on. And if you're able to thrive, and it's a perceived sensitive industry because of rules and regulations, but that's a really good insight. I think that's awesome to have it.
And that being said, our model very much bucks the trend of what a traditional firearm store looks like. So when you think of a gun store, you think of that dark, dingy kind of, pelts on the wall, deers on the wall, behind a counter, behind bars selling firearms. And that's just not the case with our stores. We very much want to be open and inviting and accommodating to everybody. So, we very much cater to that new shooter and that beginning person that may have always been intimidated to go into a store, whether that's a woman that's always wanted a firearms but been scared to go into a gun store, or even a guy that, because there's a stigma as a man, you should know firearms. And so because you don't, you never want to go into a place and feel dumb, right? So we want to be open and accommodating to everybody. And that helps us kind of capture a large part of the market that traditional firearm retailers don't even go after.
Yeah, ultimately, where your business sits, I don't think in my opinion. I don't think it's a safety question or your believability in whether you use firearms or not. It's like there's just a lack of pure education on what it is, how they work, how you use them, and therefore that creates this falsity of a fear. And in purely you being educational, I think makes a big difference. And then I'll say, like, when I'm looking at the shooting range in your video, I'm like, yeah, but we're letting people who don't know how to throw an axe fire an axe at a wall and have it come back and almost hit them in the head. Like, it's already happening with other things.
Yeah, and I mean, and honestly, training is one of our biggest components of our business model. So both from an end user perspective, but then also from a revenue perspective. You know, oftentimes for years and years, the way firearms industry makes money in training is they offer you an 8-hour course for a fixed price.
Yeah.
They give you a certificate and send you on your way. And now suddenly you're supposed to be an expert on that firearm. You know, and I always tell people, you don't go to a karate class and take an hour lesson and suddenly you have a black belt, right? So the way we do training is fundamentally different. We do training on a weekly basis. So we give them a package of X number of sessions. Typically we sell a year-long session and they come in week in, week out for an entire year. And there's an entire curriculum that we sell them. So now they're coming in every single week. And so from a education perspective, that's phenomenal. We are, you know, vastly out competing everyone in terms of like legitimate training and education and safety for every market that we go into. But then from a business perspective, that's guaranteed recurring revenue that's coming into the building week in, week out, because we're selling them that year-long package. But they're also coming into the store week in, week out, buying ammo, targets, and, you know, accessories, et cetera.
So just out of curiosity, is the bulk, well, if you had to break it down, you have the educational side, and then I'm sure there are human beings that buy firearms for perceived protection in the home. And then I would imagine like the bulk is for sport. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, everyone is looking to purchase a firearm for different reasons. I think the vast majority of people cite protection as the reason that they purchase a firearm. However, with us having the range in a place where people can come and learn and shoot, I think we tend to maybe bring them into the door as that first time purchase as a protection for the home or personal defense, et cetera. Then it turns into a hobby for them where they're coming to, you know, shoot and practice and have an enjoyable thing to do on like a date night or something like that. So.
Well, I mean, I'll say I'm super impressed by your knowledge. I mean, there are people that sell franchises that are passionate about selling franchises, but can't talk about the business the way that you have. And maybe that's going to be ultimately one of your strong suits, which goes back to what we're talking about, why the other person didn't work out. Like, you understand the ins and outs of the business. Therefore, when a candidate actually talks to you, they can ask you anything about it and you have a point of view on it. I think that's super impressive. There anything else that we haven't talked about that you want a candidate, say they've watched this video and they're intrigued by this, to know about the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things from a knowledge standpoint of us as a corporate entity. You know, the owners of Midwest Shooting Center started as franchisees, actually. So they were owners of a number of gyms. Anytime Fitness is the franchisee. They were the second largest franchisee in Anytime Fitness before they exited that business, before they started Midwest Shooting Center. So they have a knowledge of franchising and how it works, and they've been on the other side of the coin. So that's one thing. You know, we do understand, you know, how to be, you know, from a franchisee perspective. The other thing that I would say that hugely differentiates us from a business perspective in this industry specifically is the margin on firearms is very, very thin. So many people get into this industry and they try to live and die by selling a firearm, and it's just very, very difficult to be successful at that without volume. Our, you know, kind of bread and butter is our recurring revenue stream. So I talked about the training, but then also the membership is where we focus those things. So we literally just took the gym model and put it into this industry. So we took the membership and the recurring revenue from those memberships. The training is very similar to a personal trainer in a gym, and we're applying that to this industry. So regardless if we sell a firearm, we have this recurring revenue that we can depend on, and in these multiple revenue streams in our business has allowed us to expand and scale the corporate locations, and it's very much setting up franchisees to be multi-location operators.
Out of curiosity, when you're just saying that, do you get commercial business too, like local police forces? Do they use you as a solution?
100%. I mean, nowadays when we enter a new market, there is a lot of them have their own ranges and their own places to train and qualify and all that stuff, but there are plenty that don't. And even if they do have a place to qualify, they need a place to go and practice on their off time as individuals. So we'll do like corporate memberships for, federal, state, and local law enforcement to be able to come in and utilize the range anytime.
Awesome. Love it. Well, Zach, I mean, again, like I said, I'm impressed by your knowledge on the business. I think that's going to come deeply handy when you're talking with franchise candidates. Clearly, the story's there. The fact that your founders are former franchisees, and you could just go after former Anytime Fitnesses and change out the logo. But it seems like you've pieced together a lot of the right things, and you're carving a niche. You're building a business category that doesn't exist, and I look forward to seeing where the story goes. Thanks for sharing some of it with us.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Zach. For Zach and Nick, this is another episode of Meet the Zor. Take care.